I really wanted to just harken back to Leslie Frazier's game plan against the Kansas City Chiefs. And, Nate mentioned it on last week's show, throwing those unscouted looks against the Chiefs. I don't think the Chiefs were prepared to see Saron Neal be used that much. I don't think they were prepared to see the Bills run those odd mirror packages, which were those 3-down fronts with Matt Milano as that aggressive spy. And the Bills used it in strategic moments and in strategic points and high leverage situations. The game plan was so well done. The game plan, and as John says here, yes, defense with an exclamation point. The game plan was so well executed. And when you've got a good bag and you've got tricks within that bag and you can deploy them as needed, like Leslie Frazier showed, it makes this defense, and it makes a team, makes any unit, but we're talking about the Bills defense here, it makes them so dangerous because now offenses have to account for those looks now, because you've shown an ability to throw those looks out there and be successful with them, but also puts a little bit of doubt in your mind in terms of, are they going to throw something in this game that we haven't seen? And then you pair that with everything the Bills did against the Chiefs from a multiplicity perspective in coverage. They're running cover one robber. They're running cover one lurk with the hole defender, and they're varying up who that low hole player is and where they're coming from. They're running cover three. They're running cover three match. They're running quarters. They're running cover four. They're running cover two. They're running cover six. They're locking the front side or back side and then running cover two on the other side or cover four on the other side. And they're doing all this while playing games up front with the front four, while throwing in that odd mirror package. Sometimes they're just playing straight up 2-man and rushing four. So much multiplicity on this Bills defense. And I think it starts with the design and the concoctions that Leslie Frazier has cooked up and is cooking up. And it adds that little bit of doubt, and it makes you that much harder to game plan for week in and week out. It was genuinely a masterclass for Leslie Frazier and the Bills defense against the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's going to need to continue as the Bills move forward in this year and potentially see the Kansas City Chiefs again come playoff time. But with that being said, I'm very interested to see what Frazier cooks up in this game coming up against Aaron Rodgers and this Packers team, because he's been so good at pressing the right buttons, turning up and turning down the right dials at the right times in the right moments to lead this defense, being arguably the best defense in all of football right now heading into this primetime game against Green Bay. So his stock is way, way, way up. Also on the defensive side of the ball, Kaiir Elam. Going back and I watched the tape again, was going over my notes from the Kansas City game. Kaiir Elam has really taken a jump in his game. He's taken a gradual jump little by little each week. I know he got picked on a bit in that Pittsburgh game, but I've been somebody who, I didn't want to put like water on the fire, but I did pump the brakes a lot this year when it came to the talk of Kaiir Elam. There, especially early on after, I believe, the Baltimore game. People are throwing out, PFF grades and stats of how much he's been targeted, and he's given up no catches and no yards against, and all these stats and figures. But I thought they lacked context, and they didn't point to what was going on in the tape. And there were times early in this year, multiple times, where he was getting beat and there was somebody left open, but the throw would get thrown in the dirt, or the pressure would get there and the throw wouldn't get there. There were times where he was getting beat, or also he was playing so conservatively in coverage within the scheme, which is what's asked of him, but even being more conservative himself on top of that, where he wasn't really given an opportunity to potentially be targeted or be thrown at, or he was bailing so hard that the throw was just completed underneath and then the Bills would rally and tackle. But what you saw in the Kansas City game, because the Bills are running so many coverages, you saw Kaiir Elam function in a variety of ways and wear a variety of hats. And I was very impressed with his hand technique, his hand placement, his footwork, his hip fluidity, his change of direction. You saw him in off, in press man, in zone, in a variety of ways just function already like a solid to high-end number 2 corner. And I think now you're starting to see, I don't care about the numbers, because numbers can lie, and people can lie and make anything seem any way they want. When you throw out numbers, you can cherry pick and you can lie and you can mislead. And that's how incorrect narratives get formed. But when you sit and watch the film, he's made progressions little by little each week. And I thought the Kansas City game really showed a lot of positives from Kaiir Elam from a technically sound aspect and from a technique perspective in his game, let alone the interception he makes on that first drive for the Chiefs, where you just see the athleticism and the size and the strength as he just goes up and rips that down in the back of the end zone for a potential game-changing interception and momentum swinger early on. I think you're starting to see him come into his own a little bit. Rough around the edges in training camp, as was to be expected, a bit grabby and needed to adjust to the NFL game. I think you're starting to see him get better week in and week out. I still don't think he's there to the point where he is hands down the number 2 corner whenever Tre'Davious White comes back. I also think they're going to ease Tre'Davious White in. I like what Christian Benford has done, and I still like what Dane Jackson has done, and I know the coaching staff loves Dane Jackson. But Kaiir Elam is starting to already show, little glimpses and hints at being another quality first-round corner for the Buffalo Bills in a different way than Tre'Davious White does. They're different styles of corners, and they're different kinds of players. But I think he's starting to reward the Bills week in and week out for picking him at that spot. And this is a matchup where he and this Bills secondary as a whole, they have the advantage against the Packers wide receivers. It would be very nice to see Kaiir and the secondary as a whole, but, just focusing on Kaiir for this stock up segment, see him have a dominating performance, see him get into the kitchen of these Packers receivers, jam, press, get physical, use his speed and use his length, and really just affect this game from the line of scrimmage and deep, and just be an absolute nuisance to the Packers wide receivers and to Aaron Rodgers. Last stock up that I got for this week, I mentioned it in different moments and spurts in this episode, the gap runs. The gap scheme runs for the Buffalo Bills. We saw it against Pittsburgh, and again, we saw it against Kansas City. 28% on the year, but in that Kansas City Chiefs game, 50% gap run usage rate. The pin and pulls, getting Mitch Morse out into space, getting Ryan Bates out into space, Spencer Brown out into space as well before he got banged up. Seeing the Bills lean on the athleticism of their linemen up front. Mitch Morse is one of the best centers in all of football out there in space with his athleticism and his understanding of leverage and how to work out in space and open grass against defenders that are off ball. Ryan Bates, tremendously athletic, good movement guy. Spencer Brown as well. I don't want to hit on him too much because I don't know, his injury status kind of muddies the waters a little bit, but the Bills really leaning into that. Oh, I got to stop. I saw this comment pop up. John says, I couldn't see the tree very well on my phone, but it looks superb. Thank you, John. I appreciate you. I'm actually going to pull down the banner so everybody can appreciate it. So I got a little Halloween tree, little jack-o'-lantern tree topper, some purple and orange garland, some little jack-o'-lantern lights there. Appreciate you, John, for recognizing the tree. You're a good person. I greatly appreciate you for that. Everybody loves the tree. A huge fan of the tree. Again, the show just exists so we can do the tree. As I mentioned last week, I'm also a fan of the adorable little cat with the pumpkin and the purple hat. Oh, that rhymed. Look at that. Oh, I did it again. Oh, that's crazy. All right, let me stop. The Bills being able to find an identity in the run game with that gap scheme, big stock up. And I mentioned it as one of the matchups to watch this week. Can the Bills sustain a running game against a Packers team that has been gouged in the run, but in particular, a Packers defense that has been gouged against gap runs? It seems like a perfect marriage, a team that has struggled against gap runs versus a team that is starting to find success in gap runs this year like they did last year. Want to see what's going on. I want to see how that starts to merge and mesh. But again, it's a big time stock up, those gap scheme runs. And this running game, I would say as a whole, coming out of that Pittsburgh game and really leaning on it again against Kansas City, they gouged the Chiefs time and time again with some really good gap runs, especially from Singletary. They mixed in some zone as well, but the gap run scheme is a big stock up. Stock down, I really only have one. I mentioned a couple things these past weeks, and I said some things on Twitter also during that Chiefs game. The slot wide receiver position has been hit my table there. The slot wide receiver position has been an unstable one for the Buffalo Bills this year. I think you are seeing the roller coaster effect that not having Cole Beasley in the slot can have. We saw some up and down play from Jamison Crowder. We've seen up and down play from Isaiah McKenzie. I would like to see some more Khalil Shakir if McKenzie can't reduce some of those inconsistencies. We know the juice that McKenzie has. We know his ability and the coverages that he works against. I think he's gotten better this year at working against zone, but I still think he's very much a man beater and a single high coverage beater like he was in New England last year towards the end of the year in that game that he just gouged the Pats and destroyed Miles Bryant when Belichick wouldn't switch up the coverage. But I think Shakir could potentially be a stabilizing force in that slot, and they need that. They have, good point from Dobbs saying that Diggs has been awesome out of the slot this year. Yes, he has. His slot usage is up 17% versus what it was last year. Dorsey has leaned on Stephon Diggs in terms of moving him around the formation, putting him in motion, using him as that move guy, but also getting him two-way goes by putting him in the slot and creating matchup problems with personnel and alignment, getting him matched up on linebackers and allowing him to run option routes and just making defenders look foolish on the interior, or drawing coverage to the middle with bracket coverages and then allowing Josh to pick on the outside. So Dorsey's done a good job at maneuvering Stephon Diggs around and using him more in the slot. Again, 17% percentage point jump, 37% in the slot this year versus like 2021 last year. So that usage has been good. So that helps, but I think they do need that consistent slot piece that isn't just Stephon Diggs. I think I would like to see more Khalil Shakir at this point. This position, again, that slot receiver position is stocked down for me just because of the volatility and inconsistency. It's the up and downs, the roller coaster effect. It's the drops. It's the not being on the same page with Josh. It's the not settling down when you read the coverage and instead you keep going and Josh has to make a difficult throw, or the opposite. You settle down when the defender's there and instead you need to keep going and Josh is expecting you to keep going. I think also some making tough catches in contact. We've seen both Crowder and McKenzie have some contested catches where they would get rocked and the ball comes loose, and sometimes it leads to a turnover, sometimes it just leads to an incompletion. And I think that's a piece that was very underrated in Cole Beasley's game. The lack of yards after catch for him, I think people attributed that more to his skill set than they did the role in this offense. The slot receiver position is very much at times just like, hey, it's 3rd and 6. I need you to get to 7. You're going to be in between these 3 defenders. I'm going to throw you the ball. You're going to catch it, and you're going to get rocked right away. Beasley was very reliable. You heard that 3rd and Cole. And I think the Bills can still patchwork it together and maneuver around Cole Beasley not being there anymore and being in that role. But they need consistency at that position. I would like to see more Khalil Shakir. I am not saying jettison Isaiah McKenzie at all. I think he still has juice and a skill set that is valuable, but I would like to see him more just from a gadget perspective. Give me more jet motion from him. Give me more orbit motion. Put him in the backfield and leak him out into the flats. Run screens to him, all these type of, and I don't think he's just a gadget player, but he can be a chess piece when used in that gadget world. And if he can be a stabilizing piece in the slot, kudos to him and tip your hat to him. But I would like to see more Khalil Shakir at this point. I think he's needed. That slot position needs more consistency for the Buffalo Bills. It's really one of the only low spots on this Bills team from a receiver perspective. If they want to go heavier personnel and go 2 tight ends and put Knox in the slot or Quentin Morris, I'm very much okay with that. I like the scheme versatility piece of going with 2 tight ends, or even Reggie Gilliam. Reggie Gilliam, if you put him in the slot and he gets matched up against the linebacker, he actually has the matchup advantage because he's not just a fullback. He can run quasi H-back tight end routes, and he's got some speed and athleticism to his game. But either way, no matter how you slice it, if you're going with bigger personnel, if you're going with traditional, if you're going with Stephon Diggs, whoever it is, they need more consistency and stability out of that slot wide receiver position as they go forward. So that's something to keep an eye on. And one of the only few stock downs that I have for this Buffalo Bills team as they head into this primetime Sunday night game against the Green Bay Packers.